Welcome to Money Talks, a weekly feature on FM 93.5 The Berg and WMEG AM 740. Today we will talk just a little bit about money, maybe some of the things you can do with it, how it can impact your life, some ideas on financial planning and investing, and getting the most out of the money you hope to have, already have, or want to pass down. So sit back, relax, listen, and maybe take some notes, as you may have some questions by the time we're done with this edition of Money Talks. Good morning, Dan Joss. How are you today?
Doing well, thank you.
Good. Glad to hear it. So, what's on the list for topics today?
Another bias.
Another bias.
That's right. We've talked about familiarity bias, which helps us get through life faster,
Okay.
and fear and greed and herd mentality and sunk cost fallacy. So today, a new one.
A new one. How could there be yet another one?
There's a bunch of them.
There's a bunch of them.
Tracking error regret.
Tracking your regret.
Tracking error regret.
Tracking error regret. Okay. Well, yeah, I suppose that might help you not repeat the same error.
It may cause you to make more errors.
Oh, well, do
So
tell.
that's why.
That's why we're going to talk about it today.
So what is it? Well, if you've ever decided the grass is greener on the other side, you've experienced tracking error regret.
Okay.
That gnawing feeling you get when you compare yourself to external standards and you wish you were more like them.
Wow. See, I always figured the grass was greener on the other side, but you still have to fertilize it and mow it. And if you don't, it's probably fake anyway.
I fertilize and mow mine, and it never works.
Never works. Okay. So neither of us are gardeners, but you're a good financial guy. So we'll stick to the money. We'll stick to that kind of green.
That's right. Tracking error regret is helpful if you're comparing yourself to a meaningful benchmark. So it can be a positive force to, like if you're an athlete training or if you're on a weight loss program and you have your plan set out, then to compare yourself to where you thought you would be is a good thing. It can sometimes encourage you to do better or point out when you aren't on track like you thought you'd be.
Okay.
But in investments, if you compare your investments to a benchmark that doesn't look like your investments, then you've got some problems. On the radio, typically we hear about the Dow Jones,
Right.
the S&P 500, and the NASDAQ.
Mm-hmm.
And those are all, for the most part, large U.S. company stocks.
Okay.
And so if you're comparing your investments, your portfolio, to the Dow Jones, that may be a good thing if they're different, or it may be a bad thing if they're different. So the Dow Jones goes up, but if you have some bonds in your portfolio or some international stocks or other things that aren't like the Dow Jones, then comparing what your portfolio is doing to the Dow Jones can maybe make you make some mistakes.
Okay.
So in a down market, the Dow Jones is down for a month or so, and you look at your portfolio and say, why isn't mine down? Well, if you have some bonds in your portfolio, you're likely to be less down than the Dow Jones.
All right.
And that doesn't bother us because we're outperforming our benchmark.
There you go.
But when the Dow Jones is up and we're trailing, that's when it can be frustrating. We see that tracking error. We're not doing what the benchmark is doing, and we want to make changes, and so we make changes unnecessarily.
Okay. Interesting.
So it's best to compare, if you want to compare, your portfolio, your investments to a meaningful benchmark.
It almost sounds like we should compare apples to apples.
That's correct.
And oranges to oranges and Dows to Dows.
And definitely not to your neighbor.
And definitely not to your neighbor.
Because we don't know what they're doing.
That's true. The neighbor probably doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah. So that's it.
There are lots of variables in there.
Yep. So just be aware of, even subconsciously, we sometimes compare what our investments are doing to what we hear on the radio.
Okay.
And that is probably apples to oranges. And so we feel regret when we see that performance isn't the same, and we can make a bad mistake when we really are on track to what is measurably an apples to apples benchmark for us.
All right. And I guess if you're comparing apples to oranges, we just need to keep in mind that we're just going to wind up with a bunch of seedy fruits.
Just stick them all in your juicer and enjoy the drink.
There you go. All right. Well, Dan Joss, if somebody wants to get in touch with you to talk about lawn care or nutrition or financial investing, how should they do that?
Give us a call, 757-903-2127.
All right. And your website?
jossfinancial.com.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Dan.
Thank you.
Money Talks is a weekly program presented for the listener's benefit and entertainment. It is provided at no cost to the listener, and the ideas, opinions, and comments are not to be construed as legal advice, tax advice, investment advice, or other advice specific to the listener. Listeners are encouraged to seek the advice of a licensed professional or other qualified party when dealing with financial, legal, tax, medical, investment, insurance, taxidermy, plumbing, electrical, carpentry, real estate, chiropractic, veterinary, oral hygiene, hot air ballooning, etc. We have given you some food for thought. Now, call a licensed professional such as Dan Joss at 757-903-2127. Thanks for listening, and remember, failing to plan is planning to fail.